All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. Had a little bit of technical problems, but hopefully that is now resolved. Anyways, I just want to let you know I am Ray Young. I am the president of the Chicago Archaeological Society. Our group has been meeting in some way, shape, or form for about 100 years. And we have had some incredible speakers and very much looking forward to today. But a little bit about us. So, we are one of many chapters in the state of Illinois. We are part of the Illinois Association for the Advancement of Archaeology. So, our group started actually before the Illinois Association for the Advancement of Archaeology, the IAAA. Uh, but we joined them sometime in the late 1960s, early 1970s. Our mission was to better understand the existence of mankind. After joining the IAAA, we also adopted their mission, which is to better explain the archaeology and anthropology of the Midwest, especially Illinois. But so we have those two missions. And if you become a member and support our mission of better understanding the world, you not only get our codex, our that comes out most months of the year. You also get the IAAA magazine, which is a wonderful explanation of what's going on in the state of Illinois for archaeology. It comes out several times a year. So I hope you will support our mission. You can find out more at chicagoarchaeology.org. That's chicagoarchaeology.org. I hope that you renew your membership and become a member and support our endeavors. All right. Sorry about the technical problems, but let me tell you a little bit about today's speaker and the subject matter. So she will be speaking about the Rio Grande de Nazca drainage area. This is part of South America, Peru, and there's incredible artwork there, incredible civilizations, including that of the Nazca area. And she will be speaking about the petroglyphs of the Rio Grande de Nazca area. And her name is Dr. Ana Nieves. She has been a speaker for us before and glad to have her back. So she's an art historian, which focuses on the ancient civilization of the south coast of Peru. Her primary documentation analysis is of rock art in the, again, Rio Grande de Nazca drainage area. She holds a PhD in art history from the University of Texas at Austin and is a professor of art history in Art and Design Department at Northeastern Illinois University in Chicago. So please, everyone, welcome Dr. Ana Nieves.
Thank you. Um, could we make it a little bit darker in here by any chance? Yes, as dark as possible, because if we can make it even darker, yes, because like some of the videos are going to be dark. Perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon. Let's see if I can get this microphone. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Chicago Archaeological Society for having me here to be able to share some of the research in the rock art sites of the Nazca Valley. It's an honor to be here again. Last time I was here, I spoke about ceramic iconography. So now I get to talk about rock art.
Could you please talk into the microphone?
Yes, let me see if I can adjust this to my height. Okay, is it better?
Yes.
Okay, great. And second, before I start, I also want to acknowledge Goritumi Echevarria, with whom I worked on some of the projects that I will be discussing here today. All of the images that I will present here that involve reflectance transformation imaging, or RTI, were done with his collaboration. And some of the observations that I will address here regarding manufacturing techniques at the site of Humana, which is the first site that I will be talking about, are also the result of our collaborative work at the site. Basically the image captures that we did for all of the RTI images that you will see in videos were done with his help. Okay, let's go ahead and start. Detailed observations are crucial for the study and analysis of rock art. and these can only be achieved with careful and thorough documentation. In the Rio Grande de Nazca drainage in the department of Ica in the south coast of Peru, large-scale geoglyphs, popularly known as the Nazca lines, are some of the best examples of rock art in the world, or the best known examples of rock art in the world. This area, though, has many concentrations of petroglyphs, smaller scale rock art. While the Nazca lines have been the focus of many studies in the past, the petroglyphs of the Nazca Valley have received relatively less attention. In both of these art forms, there are clear examples of iconographic motifs found in the art of Paracas and Nazca civilizations, making the petroglyphs contemporaneous with the Nazca lines or geoglyphs. This presentation will focus on two petroglyph sites in the lower Nazca Valley. Although I will start at each site with iconographic and stylistic comparisons, we will move beyond that and we'll look closely at manufacturing processes and techniques used on these rock surfaces, as well as the relationship between marks and motifs. One site has evidence of multiple episodes of petroglyph making activity, while the second site seems to be mostly part of a single program. Hopefully, this type of analysis will lead to a more nuanced discussion of rock art in the south coast of Peru, without broad generalizations regarding the dating, function, and significance of these sites. So let me introduce the area. Right here, what you're seeing is a map of the valleys of the Rio Grande de Nazca drainage, which is in the south coast of Peru. There's several valleys that make up this river drainage. I will be mentioning, of course, the lower Nazca Valley, which you see right here. That's where I did my rock art site survey. I'll mention the plateaus between the Nazca and the Ingenio valleys. There's Pampa right there. And I will also be mentioning some of the northern valleys of the drainage, especially the Palpa Valley right here. The Palpa with an L, that's the valley. Pampa with an M refers to the plateaus. So let's further introduce this region. The Peruvian south coast is a narrow, dry strip of land cut by rivers that flow to the Pacific Ocean. In the Rio Grande de Nazca drainage, the elevated plateaus between valleys are known as pampas, which means flat in Quechua. Low hills and quebradas, which are dry stream beds or ravines, flank these valleys. This is a satellite image of this region, and you can see here, this is the area that I'm going to be talking about, the Nazca Valley, the lower Nazca. Here's the Ingenio Valley to the north, and these plateaus, that's what's known as the Nazca Pampa, which has a large concentration of geoglyphs. There are known concentrations of petroglyphs, particularly in the northern valleys of the drainage, including the Palpa and Santa Cruz valleys. And these have been the focus of a lot of the rock art research that took place in the 20th century. Significant work in the Palpa Valley has been conducted by a team led by Johnny Isla and Marcus Reindel. As a result of very careful and thorough research in this valley, these scholars argued that the famous geoglyphs on the Pampas have their origins on the area's petroglyphs. As proposed in their publications, the progression of petroglyphs to geoglyphs is as follows. First, the inhabitants of the Palpa Valley incised and scratched designs on the boulders on the hillsides in the form of petroglyphs, such as those found in the site of Chichitara. So these are all petroglyphs on the Palpa Valley. Then similar motifs, specifically these anthropomorphic figures, were drawn in larger scale as geoglyphs on hillsides where they would still be visible from the ground. And finally, these geoglyphs became more abstract and reduced to simple geometric forms. These were made on raised flat areas such as the Pampas, no longer visible from the valleys. So what I am going to show you are a couple of other comparisons of these geoglyphs in the northern part of the drainage, which you see on the left at the site of Yipata. And on the right are some of the petroglyphs that, according to this group, are basically the inspiration for those larger geoglyphs, and those you see on the photograph on the right. And they argue these became a lot more stylized, more geometric, and moved away from the valleys into the plateaus. And some of these are representational images as well. And these are, of course, the famous Nazca lines. Similarities in the choice of motifs, the anthropomorphs, as well as the location of these art forms supported their proposed sequence. Their hypothesis for this development also implies a progression from naturalistic to stylized that can also be observed in the art of in the ceramic art of the Nazca civilization. The sequence seems to be accurate for most Palpa Valley petroglyphs and geoglyphs. For the Nazca Valley sites, though, I argue that a more complex and nuanced chronology is possible, accounting for multiple mark-making moments on petroglyph panels due to the use and reuse of those sites. The study of geoglyphs in the South Coast has incorporated discussions of manufacturing techniques that supplement iconographic and stylistic comparisons. For example, the distinction between line-type geoglyphs and relief geoglyphs, and the use of subtractive as well as additive techniques of manufacture. Overlapping is also evident in some of these geoglyphs, allowing scholars to address the reuse of these sites. And in this particular photograph, you can see that there are multiple geoglyphs that have been basically made one on top of the other, right? So they continuously added to what was at this location. You can also see that in this satellite image, right? Clearly, some images are drawn over earlier images. Petroglyph sites, on the other hand, are often presented and discussed as being made in a single manufacturing episode, even within larger sites. Bless you. However, one should consider the possibility of multiple periods or phases at single sites, and that single motifs can also include later interactions that modified their appearance. Just like there is overlapping in geoglyphs, one could explore also overlapping and reuse of motifs in petroglyphs and pictographs in the Nazca Valley. A discussion of various manufacturing techniques should also complement the iconographic and stylistic analyses. My work in the South Coast of Peru with rock art sites in the South Coast of Peru dates to the year 2000, when I conducted a rock art survey of the Nazca Valley in preparation for my dissertation. At the time, I was able to document the location of 26 concentrations of petroglyphs and pictographs that had not been mentioned in any publications up to that point. Initially, I focused on documentation through photographs and line drawings, and the identification and classification of petroglyph motif types in order to place them within the chronology of the cultures of the Department of Ica. This was done by comparing attributes present in petroglyph motifs to those present in objects with better known chronologies, primarily textiles and ceramics. Dating through stylistic analysis or through the comparison of attributes can be a useful first step in order to place a petroglyph motif or descriptive type within a known chronology. Some of these petroglyphs had iconographic parallels to Paracas and Nazca art, including some of the motifs that I will discuss today. So in this presentation today, I'm going to focus on two specific sites. I wanted to show you something that is not from those sites, but is a great example of these comparisons that can be made between petroglyphs and other art forms. This particular design, for example, this particular petroglyph, you can see there's a figure with a rectangular head, and I've made a line drawing right here, but you can see it's in bad shape, as you can see in the photograph. But this design is comparable to, this design is comparable to representations on painted textiles. If you look at the examples on the right, you'll be able to see that although the head shape is different, the shape of the mouth is very similar. There's also these little notches on the upper part of the head, and that pendant nose that you can see here is also present in those textile representations. So there's clear associations between what's in the petroglyph and some designs that we know are shown on these painted textiles. Now, one thing I need to address is that what I'm making are basically comparisons so that we can talk about associations. I can use those as very general dates as well, but as I start talking, for example, about Paracas textiles, some Paracas necropolis textiles are basically roughly contemporaneous to the earliest Nazca phases. So in some cases, dating more specifically can be a bit tricky. In order to incorporate discussions of manufacturing techniques in the studies of Nazca Valley rock art, I started using reflectance transformation imaging, or RTI, in 2012, and photogrammetry starting in 2015. RTI involves taking a series of photographs of the same subject with the camera in a fixed position. During this capture sequence, the subject is lit from a different angle in each photograph, with a light source at a consistent distance from the surface. Using the RTI Builder software, I combine the data from all of the photographs into an interactive image that can be digitally relit from different angles in a viewing program. I'll show several examples of that today. And this will allow for a close and thorough examination of the surface by anyone, anywhere. RTI images are helpful in documenting characteristics of petroglyphs that are often lost in line drawings or maybe not clearly visible in some photographs. And it might allow to better visualize the superimposition of motifs and different manufacturing techniques that are used. As mentioned earlier, for RTI image captures, I counted on the help of Peruvian archaeologist Goritumi Echevarria. Photogrammetry complements RTI in many ways due to the specific distance of the light source in the RTI image capture sequence, as well as the limitations of space around some petroglyph panels. It may not be possible to document very large areas with RTI alone. The image capture sequence for photogrammetry involves systematically taking a series of overlapping photographs of the subject and then combining them in order to create a three-dimensional model, a digital 3D model. With photogrammetry, one can document larger areas. So it is possible to have 3D models of entire rock art panels and large boulders. One can also add measurability to the 3D models by including calibrated scales in the image captures. So let's start with the sites. These are the two sites that I'm going to be focusing on today. There's the Nazca Valley right there, and I'm going to be talking about Humana, which is right here, and Majuelos, which is right there.
Could you talk into the microphone?
Yes.
Every time you turn the map,
Okay, I will try to turn a little closer. So these are the two sites that I'm going to be focusing on. This is Humana, and I'll show these maps again as I start showing photographs of the sites, and this is Majuelos over here. So the first site in the Nazca Valley that I selected for this presentation was labeled X02 in my dissertation. But due to its location close to the Hacienda Humana, I will be referring to it as Humana here. The site of Humana is located in one of the quebradas or dry stream beds in the northeastern side of the Nazca Valley. It consists of a series of sandstone boulders that broke off from the sedimentary strata in the upper portion of the slope on the north side of the quebrada. The rock art covered surfaces show signs of cracking and exfoliation that have affected their condition and preservation. This site is rare among rock art sites in the river drainage since it has pictographs as well, so paintings. And at the site, I'm going to be talking about two of these boulders, not all of them, simply Rock 1 and Rock 3. So here's a photograph that shows you where they're located in relation to each other. Rock 1 at the site includes petroglyphs that have attributes comparable to motifs on Paracas textiles. One motif, and I have a line drawing right here. One motif depicted several times on Rock 1 consists of stylized representations of felines, executed in a similar scale, oriented towards the right of the relatively flat side of the boulder that faces the northeast. They all have large ears, mostly triangular, a curved back, elongated bodies that taper into the shape of a tail, and faces that are shown frontally with simple eyes and a line for a mouth. Two of them have circular pits as spots on their bodies. Other figures are arranged to fit the spaces around these felines, which indicates that these felines were some of the earliest representations to be carved onto rock one. The felines at Humana, and I'm showing you details of the 4 felines right here on rock one. The felines at Humana are consistent with feline petroglyphs in other lower Nazca Valley rock art sites. Many of the Nazca Valley feline petroglyphs, including 2 at Humana, have an appendage or streamer that emerges from the chin, which ends in either a face or a series of rayed lines. These are the 4 felines of rock one at Humana. These felines are from different sites also in the Nazca Valley. And if you look at these representations, a lot of them have those streamers or appendages that emerge from the lower part of their heads. And they're present here and here at the site of Humana. Nazca Valley felines appear to be iconographically related to Paracas linear style embroideries, since one attribute of these linear style felines is a long appendage that is attached to the chin of these figures. You can see that there and right there on this photograph. Rock one also has a petroglyph that represents a human head with large circular eyes, a line for a mouth, and parallel bands on the upper side of the head. This motif is near the center of the boulder's northeastern side. This is a unique image for a number of reasons. First of all, the scale of the head is quite large in relation to other anthropomorphic figures on the same boulder. Second, the orientation of the head is also different than the rest of the figures on this boulder, as it is depicted sideways. And third, other anthropomorphs on this boulder have small carved circular pits as eyes, but this one has large outlined circles as eyes. This head also shares iconographic similarities to motifs in Paracas textiles. In the Paracas block color style of embroideries, there are representations of skeletal beings with long flowing hair. The heads are usually tilted back at a sharp angle from the body. Their flowing hair is often depicted as parallel lines, and their eyes are also large, outlined circular shapes, characteristics also seen in representations of trophy heads in Paracas embroideries. Trophy heads are often held or worn by elaborately dressed figures. The angle and attributes of the petroglyph head at Humana link this petroglyph to those Paracas motifs. In iconographic associations between Paracas textiles and both the head and the feline petroglyphs, the iconographic associations between Paracas textiles and both of the feline and head shapes on rock one suggest that at least some of the rock one petroglyphs at Humana were carved during the later portion of the early Horizon through the beginning of the early intermediate period. So a broad estimate for that would be roughly from like 300 BC to about 100 CE. However, the entire site has a wide range of motifs, and some of them cannot be compared to diagnostic material. This date range, therefore, applies specifically to these petroglyph motifs that I just mentioned and should only be considered anchor points for reference. A close look at the superimposition of these motifs might extend and complicate the date range considerably. Yes.
Switch out the microphone. Let's see if this one is a little bit better.
Okay.
You know what? This one died.
Oh.
So that'll do it.
Is this better?
Oh, what?
Okay, great. This. Okay. So rock one, which is the one where we've been looking at these motifs. Rock one, for example, has a number of anthropomorphs that are problematic because they don't all share the same stylistic traits. Some, but not all, have large circular heads and rectangular bodies executed with simple lines. Another different type of anthropomorph was carved over one of the previously mentioned felines. The figure's body is executed as a silhouette without linear contours. In the RTI viewer, we can identify the different carving techniques used on the feline and the anthropomorph. It is possible that the anthropomorph was made using direct percussion, which usually results in uneven dents over an area with a stippled appearance. The anthropomorph is very lightly carved compared to the deeper grooves on the feline's body. It is evident that the anthropomorphic figure was carved after the feline because it was designed to fit the space between the feline's triangular ears, using the space between the ears as the figure's torso. There is also evidence of different tool marks on the feline's body and the appendage on the lower portion of the feline's head. Whereas the outline of the body is thick and has irregular edges, the appendage that emerges from its chin consists of a much thinner line with very clean edges. This appendage was incised or cut onto the surface of the stone with a narrow, sharp tool. In other words, although the iconography of this feline motif and the appendage or streamer corresponds neatly with Paracas textile motifs, the distinctly different tool marks could indicate that the appendage was a later addition. This contrasts with the other feline on the same panel that also has an appendage. In the case of the second feline, both the body and the appendage were made with lines of similar width and depth. These lines were probably incised onto the surface with the same tool, one that is wider than the tool used for the appendage of the previously described feline. And I am, of course, referring to this appendage right here and the radiating lines that emerge from it, similar width as the contours of the feline. Rock 3 at the site of Cumana is an interesting case study because it also displays multiple manufacturing episodes and includes pictographs as well as petroglyphs, some of which seem to be related to the anthropomorphic figures on Rock 1. The pictographs were part of the earliest manufacturing episode on Rock 3. There are at least 5 red pictographs depicting zoomorphs in profile view on Rock 3. So if you have a cell phone, you can actually use this QR code to access a 3D model of this particular rock. This will allow you to zoom in as I speak about this petroglyph panel. Y'all have that. There are at least 5 pictographs depicting zoomorphs in profile view on Rock 3. There are also at least 2 yellow zoomorphs in the upper portion of the decorated side. The painted zoomorphs all face to the left of the decorated side or uphill on the actual slope. There are more traces of red and yellow paint outside of these zoomorphs, which indicates that more paintings were part of this boulder, but have been damaged. This damage seems limited to natural causes as there is no evidence of graffiti on this boulder. There are also small marks that are carved or pegged onto the bodies of the red pictographs, as you can see here. This is a de-stretch photo, so you can see this motif over here, and notice how these little circular carved out markings are limited to the shape of that particular zoomorph. The presence of pictographs in the Rio Grande Nazca drainage is rare. 2 additional boulders at Cumana contain pictographs. On Rock 2, there are 2 zoomorphs in yellow ochre, while Rock 5 has small, simple forms in red. Naturally occurring ochres are still present in the area, and those were likely the source of the pigment used at with these pictographs. On Rock 3, the directionality of the red pictographs, the color of the pigment, and the basic forms used to define the shape of these zoomorphs is consistent, indicating that they all belong to a single group. The pictographs are therefore the first phase of rock art on this boulder. The small carved marks on their bodies constitutes a later phase of activity. A later manufacturing episode on the same boulder involved the making of representational petroglyphs that were carved over the pictographs. Although there is some variation among the anthropomorphic petroglyphs on Rock 3, they share some attributes. The two figures on the left, highlighted on this slide, have rectangular bodies defined by outlines, and their legs are attached to the torso on the lower corners of the rectangle. The round heads are topped with radiating lines, an attribute present on several of the Rock 1 figures. The completely pecked figure on the right, this one, relies less on contour, but has a similarly shaped body and also radiating lines on top of its head. Above and to the right of the first two figures mentioned, there is a rectangular shape divided into four by two straight lines and straight parallel lines emerging from the top. The rectangular motif has two circular pits inside of it, transforming it into a very abstract head. To the right of the rectangular motif are two animals, one of which is a bird. The anthropomorphic figure on the left of Rock 1 displays two distinct techniques. The contours of this figure show a combination of incision and percussion techniques, and the rounded imprints of percussion impacts are clearly visible on the RTI viewer, particularly on the figure's right arm. Another episode of manufacture involved incisions that were made inside of the percussion marks. So if you look at this leg right here, let me go back a little bit on that. You can see the round percussion marks and then a sharp line as a light moves around right there, which is done in the interior of the groove produced by the percussion marks. The anthropomorph to the right of this one also uses direct percussion for the head and the arms, but there's a separate manufacturing episode that also involves incisions, such as those on the top of the head. Part of the body was also redrawn and recarved using incisions within the wider grooves of the body. So this one also has those circular rounded marks from percussion and also the incised lines inside of it. In the rectangular motif to the right of the anthropomorphs, on the other hand, there are no repeated round percussion marks that are present in the previously discussed anthropomorphic figures. As one moves the light around in the figure, around the figure on the RTI viewer, one can see wide incised marks clearly, and the angle of the bevel marks remains consistent throughout. One could even argue that the person who carved this figure was right-handed based on that angle. This petroglyph, in other words, was made with a single technique, one that is considerably different than those used in the previously described anthropomorphs. The incised lines in this motif are wider, showing that this is made with a different tool than the tool that was made for the incisions on the previous anthropomorphic figures. Based on the iconography and the style of some of these motifs, we can argue that there was a significant period of activity at Humana between the end of the early Horizon and the beginning of the early intermediate period. But the activity extends beyond the dates that are evident based exclusively on comparisons of motifs and attributes. Sometimes the image was redrawn, while other times it might have been partially covered by a later image, as is the case of the paintings being covered by the petroglyphs. The partial destruction of an earlier motif by a later intrusive petroglyph may be understood if sufficient time has passed between both events, so that the earlier image no longer has the same meaning or function. What we see now at Humana is the cumulative record of different activities at the single site. Distinct and different tool marks suggest different hands at work within these rock art panels. And we can argue that different manufacturing episodes can also be present within single motifs. The site changed through time as people carved images over earlier motifs or altered them, and as other figures were added around earlier ones. Although iconographic comparisons to objects with better known chronologies provide a framework for dating some of these motifs, later activity at the site is very difficult to date. So now we're moving on to the second site. So that's Humana. The site we just saw is right here, and now we're going to move to this one inside this large Quebrada Majuelos that you see on this map. The second site I will talk about here is the site of Majuelos, within the Quebrada Majuelos in the Nazca Valley. The site was first documented by Donald Proul in his settlement survey of the Nazca Valley, a project for which I worked as an assistant. Proul included a description of the site in his report to the Peruvian Ministry of Culture. Although there are other rock art sites within Quebrada Majuelos, I'm simply referring to this one as Majuelos for clarity. The site, there's a location of the site on the satellite image, and here's the site. The site consists of a rock wall of sandstone with a natural overhang. There is evidence of looting holes at the site. Small fragments of bone, as well as Nazca culture pottery shards, can be found on the surface. Petroglyphs at the site are on poorly cemented sandstone, a relatively soft surface that does not require percussion techniques to be marked. Unfortunately, the ease with which one can mark the stone surface at the site has also facilitated recent graffiti, so a thorough documentation of the site was essential. And here's a couple of other photos of the rock art panels. Although the petroglyphs at Majuelos display some variability in terms of scale, and there is evidence of different techniques here as well, it is difficult to argue here for multiple manufacturing episodes within single petroglyph motifs in the same way that we saw at Humana. I'll be spending most of my time with this particular panel, panel F, at Majuelos. Panel F at Majuelos has examples of both lightly incised motifs and also a large motif made with deep grooves, which are about 2 centimeters wide and 2 centimeters deep. The large petroglyph at Majuelos was described in the report of Donald Proul that he wrote for the settlement pattern survey. And he identified this motif, this large petroglyph, as a Nazca mythical killer whale. I'm going to show you several examples of the Nazca mythical killer whale in ceramics. The mythical killer whale has a long history in the south coast of Peru. It even predates the Nazca civilization, since Paracas art is without a doubt the source for this particular motif. The way in which this figure is depicted in early Nazca ceramics is fairly consistent. In Nazca ceramics, the mythical killer whale has triangular fins and a human arm often emerges from the lower portion of its body, characteristics that are also present in Paracas versions of this motif. The head of the Nazca mythical killer whale has a large circular eye with a dark round pupil. Its flat snout opens to reveal triangular teeth. And there might be a curl under its head or several thin parallel lines emerging from that rectangular snout. And those are typically shown also on depictions of foxes. So this is definitely a composite creature that combines part orca, part human, part fox traits, maybe shark traits as well. This motif is closely associated to the theme of trophy head taking, since the figure might hold a head or a knife. This one, as you can see, is holding a trophy head. You also saw a trophy head on this, held by this particular mythical killer whale. And like I mentioned, these are the Nazca ceramic versions of the mythical killer whale. There are also Paracas representations of the same motif. As you can see here, those also have a human arm and can be shown holding a little trophy head as well. The mythical killer whale is also represented in the area's geoglyphs too. What I'm showing you here are a couple of the geoglyphs showing marine figures on the Nazca Pampa, and you can see this one has an extension right here, and it looks like it's holding a trophy head. This one has been cleared recently. This one's actually on a slope of a hill and has different stylistic characteristics, but this design, this motif, is in various different art forms in this region. The Majuelos mythical killer whale measures about 2 meters and 35 centimeters long, so it's over 7 feet long. And I actually have a 3D model of this one as well, in case you have your phone and want to play a little bit with and zoom in on this representation. The Majuelos mythical killer whale has an upward curving body with triangular fins, and the body ends in a bifurcated tail. Corresponding to its traditional iconography, it has a human arm. It has a point ear, a rectangular snout, and a hook-like extension underneath the chin. Its eye consists of a round outlined shape with a circular pit carved at its center, a three-dimensional version of the eye with a black pupil that we see on the Nazca ceramics. This eye is difficult to see in ambient light photos because there was a significant amount of stone loss due to scaling within the eye. But these are some manipulated images with the RTI viewer where the shape of the eye is clearly visible. Although Paracas art also has representations of orca motifs with human arms, the iconography on this particular petroglyph is more aligned to the conventions and canons of Nazca art. Besides the curl under the snout, the body of the petroglyph is divided into parallel bands with parallel lines. Close to the tail, there's a particular shape at the on the central line, which resembles the eye-shaped navel of the anthropomorphic mythical being in Nazca ceramics. This symbol is not typically shown on mythical killer whale representations, but it supports the identification of this petroglyph motif as Nazca. Furthermore, I have only observed Nazca ceramic sherds every time I have been in the site in multiple visits to this location. The lines used to create this large mythical killer whale petroglyph are deep grooves compared to other petroglyphs on the same rock art panel. Another large-scale petroglyph of a marine animal is also present at the site, which you can see on this photograph and drawing, which is also made with deep grooves, and it's also very large. We can place these two petroglyphs within the same manufacturing episode at that site. The second petroglyph faces to the left and also has lines on its body, but it has a pointed head shape and lacks the pointed ear. The large mythical killer whale petroglyph is centrally located on this rock art panel, with other small petroglyphs around it. Those smaller images are made with shallow and narrow incised lines. Interestingly, none of those smaller petroglyphs are within the body of the mythical killer whale. This suggests that the larger mythical killer whale was carved first, and the smaller images with thin lines were made later, filling up the space around that large mythical killer whale. Among these smaller in size representations is a second mythical killer whale between the upper fins of the tail of the larger one. This motif was not included in Peru's original description of the site, partly because it's very difficult to see. It's very faint, very weathered. And if the light isn't right, it's very difficult to actually even take a good photograph of this design. So I do have that RTI video here so you can actually see it. Both the large mythical killer whale and the smaller in size one face the same direction. Like the larger mythical killer whale, the smaller one also has a rectangular snout, long ears, and a banded body. There you go. And a banded body with triangular fins. It is important to note that the proportions of the eyes, the ears, and the head are very similar to the larger petroglyph. The curvature of the body of the smaller figure mirrors the shape of the larger one. In every way, the smaller in size version, this is a smaller in size version of the larger petroglyph. The placement suggests that it post-dates the larger mythical killer whale, but the consistency in its attributes and styles indicates that the time between these manufacturing episodes was not very long. You have a couple of more close-ups of that very faint, lightly incised small petroglyph. Among Okay, sorry. There are other small petroglyphs at Majuelos that are also made with a similar technique as the small mythical killer whale. There are in other rock art panels at the same site. Some of these other designs that are incised depict standing anthropomorphic figures, and these are between 30 and 50 centimeters in height. So they're not particularly big. They're nowhere near as big as those large petroglyphs in the site. They have open circular eyes and vertical lines above their heads, suggesting hair. The quality of the lines of these anthropomorphic petroglyphs resemble the lines used for the small mythical killer whale. And the amount of weathering on the edges of these incised lines is very similar to that small petroglyph. Interestingly, on the anthropomorphic figures, small vertical lines descend from their mouths, which indicate that these are representations of animated trophy heads. In Nazca ceramics, trophy heads are often shown with vertical lines that cross their lips. These lines are visual representations of the cactus spines or the thorns of the warango tree that the Nazca used to seal the mouth of ritually treated human heads. In other words, although the large mythical killer whale petroglyph is not actually shown holding a trophy head, other petroglyph panels throughout the site feature trophy head iconography that complements and reinforces the iconography of that mythical killer whale petroglyph. The close association of the mythical killer whale to the ritual of head taking is still there. In contrast to the site of Humana, the evidence of the rock art panels at Majuelos seems to support that the large marine motifs and the small anthropomorphic representations are part of a single manufacturing episode, rather than the result of multiple visits and moments of activity at the site. This is supported by the iconography, but also by the consistent techniques used in the anthropomorphic figures and the small mythical killer whale petroglyph, so that we can group all of them together. Imaging techniques such as reflectance transformation imaging help provide a much more thorough study of these petroglyphs, allowing an analysis of the petroglyphs that goes beyond descriptions of form and style and iconography. In some cases, such as at Humana, we can see the site as continuously changing and growing through time, the result of the dynamic relationship between people and the site. The rock art at Humana is a cumulative record of the activity at this location. We only see the last stage, whatever was left when activity at the site stopped. Although it is difficult to determine the time elapsed between manufacturing episodes in these petroglyph panels, it is clear that these rock art sites were undergoing continuous change. Multiple contributors were involved in the manufacture of petroglyphs and were carving and recarving and modifying earlier motifs at the site, suggesting an enduring awareness of these sites and continuous use of these locations. At the site of Majuelos, we may initially assume that differences in scale and the width and depth of the marks on the rocks are indicative of multiple manufacturing episodes. However, as one looks closely at the quality of the lines used in the smaller anthropomorphic figures, their characteristics suggest that these are part of the same manufacturing episode as the small mythical killer whale. As we compare the techniques to the iconography, in this case, the mythical killer whale and the small incised figures are thematically related and seem to be part of the same mark-making moment. Rock art sites are complex, and answers sometimes are not always simple or straightforward. But these are, of course, the challenges that keep us coming back and sparking debate about these motifs. Thank you.
Oh, that was wonderful. I'm hoping we don't get any feedback from me talking in the other room. Can people that are actually in the audience hear me?
I think so.
Yeah. At this time, we'd like to take some questions. And I see one. Oh, the second QR code was not up long enough. Janet mentions.
Oh, I can Go back to that. That one.
Very good.
One at Majuelos.
And in the chat, I'm going to put a link to how to support the Archaeological Society. All right. Yeah, please post your questions in the Q&A, or if you feel comfortable, raise your hand and I can unmute you if you'd like to talk. Okay. Check in the chat. I had the great pleasure to be able to go out and have a couple beers with Tom Zudema, um, who was a great expert researcher on Indian culture. And he mentioned that the symbols in Nazca might be symbols of clans or ayus and depicting um, the land that was attributed to the different clans. Any opinions about that? Is that there maybe some truth to it?
Well, there are so many, you're talking about the geoglyphs, right?
Yeah, geoglyphs, Nazca lines, those symbols of, not just depicting, mythical or real animals, but depicting the symbols of the different clans and their possible ownership of the land and dominance.
That's definitely a possibility. I find it really difficult to have one explanation for all of these geoglyphs just because there's so many different types of examples. For example, I was showing some that are on hillsides. Like the one I'm showing here. Some of them are very stylized and geometric. Some are made with like subtractive techniques by removing that surface layer of stones. Some are made have more of a like an additive process, right? They pile the stones together to create more of a relief.
Hmm.
So because there's different locations, different styles, different
Hmm.
manufacturing techniques that are used, it's difficult to just explain them with one single
Hmm.
explanation.
Okay.
They could have had a long history
Yeah.
in this
I
area.
was almost thinking of it a little bit like in modern urban uh, society, people tagging their names to be remembered and kind of to show their group dominance, even in Chicago. So the whole tagging graffiti culture, but on a
Uh-huh.
much larger scale, obviously in Peru. We have a question from G Farmer. I will let you talk if you'd like to.
Sure.
Can that be put up on the screen or something,
Um,
right? So the audience here can feel more a part of the questioning and.
Sure. Hold on. G Farmer was about to ask a question. Are you able to ask?
how do I,
Oh, I did it for you.
okay.
They're unmuted, but I don't hear them talking. Maybe they're
I
having
don't
trouble with their
either.
microphone. Okay, it looks like they just muted themselves.
Okay,
Okay. Anyways, why don't we take some questions from the audience? Hold on.
The map, I changed, a real map, of the area, thought, see where,
the first map?
yeah.
Yes.
So we're just asked from the audience here about a real map of the area.
And then if I would have gone to see the, Nazca lines, which I did, where would that,
That would be right there.
right there? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
So this is the Nazca Valley and that's the Ingenio, and the Pan American Highway goes right there. So that's where the main, that's where like the large pampa that has a lot of the representational images, like the spider and the, the tree and all of those. But there are geoglyphs all over the place. There's some, on Palpa, I showed the little anthropomorphs on the hillside. Those are closer to the Palpa Valley. Those are right
And
around.
the tourists go to those places?
Now they do. They're close to the Pan American Highway, and they've cleared them for easy viewing. So one can actually take a little road, and there's like a viewing area for a lot of these.
4 years ago.
No, a lot is changing there. They have like a new viewing tower also. That is a lot sturdier.
I should go back.
The other one was a little scary, but no, this one's a lot taller and sturdier now.
I want to ask another question. I'm going to ask to use the microphone so that the microphone on the laptop can pick it up. More questions?
A question from an English major, is Lima, Peru anywhere near that on that map somewhere?
Not on this map. It's, well, actually right there, right at the central coast. So it's to the north.
And where are the Nazca lines compared with Peru?
They're right, this is in the highlighted area.
One so, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Couple of days drive maybe.
No, no, it's about, what, 6 hours or so?
From Chile?
Yeah.
I've always been a little scared to take an airplane over the Nazca lines. They're not the biggest planes.
No.
No, but great fun. You should do it.
Yeah, it does look like a lot of fun. I'm just scared.
Are there any habitation sites that seem to be directly associated with the two sites anyway that you've talked about today? And
Yes.
do they indicate, like, one seemed to have just like a single episode of the impressions on the rocks, and the other seemed maybe over maybe more time? So do they both seem to be long-term habitation, or was one of them a shorter term habitation versus the other having a longer term habitation?
I mean, there's a lot of habitation sites. In fact, I mentioned that I started becoming interested in this because I was working as the assistant to Donald Proul, and he was doing a settlement site survey. And those are, of course, right on the valley, right? So this is where people live. The sites that I'm talking about are in these, in those quebradas. So they're not, I mean, they're walkable, but they're not right next to the habitation sites. If you look at the quebrada, especially this large one though, people still use that to go from like one valley to another, to basically cut across from one valley to the other. So these received, you know, these had traffic of people going from, you know, the Ingenia Valley to the Nazca Valley, or even from the Nazca Valley to access, you know, these area that has those, the Nazca Lines geoglyphs. But they're not like immediately next to, at least in this case.
Another interpretation that I heard about the symbols around Nazca is markers for water. Any thoughts on that?
Yes, I guess Donald worked with David Johnson on that. I don't know that anything conclusive
Okay.
was arrived at, to that. I know that they were mapping, the argument was that the lines indicated the underground, like the aquifers, basically. Yeah, I don't know that, you know, I mean, there's so many ideas.
Yeah. No, it's all so fascinating.
Yes.
Trying to get it in the minds of people that lived so long ago and made such beautiful images.
And this is like a huge blackboard, like a huge
Yeah.
canvas, the whole landscape.
And the range of time that's being represented here.
Again, that's gonna be tricky. So I
Okay.
know like the images that I worked with, like there's some motifs that you can compare to textiles or to ceramics, but not all of them.
Okay.
So that's where it gets tricky, when you know that there's later activity on those rock art panels, but determining just how late or how much later, that's it's difficult. Great.
I have another question.
Yes.
That really green part, the very green part at the top of the picture, do people live there now? Are they, is that a small village or?
Yes, so these are the valleys, that's the Grande Valley and Kenya Valley, there's a town right there, Nazca is down there, like the modern town of Nazca.
Thank you.
So yes, there's a tiny little settlement right here at the entrance of Quebrada Majuelos.
Are any of the turning things around a bit, are any of the textiles actually taking their inspiration from the rock art and as opposed to
That's tricky. That's also difficult. I mean, we can make those comparisons and determine iconographically, you know, they're basically the same motif. But which one came first? It's a little harder. They're also, I mean, it's interesting to see that we can recognize them because of their iconography, like their attributes, but clearly the style is totally different. Even when scholars make comparisons between like the Nazca lines and like Nazca ceramics, yes, it's the same motif, but their styles are a little bit different because one is meant to be like something like the spider, for example, right? That's supposed to be the main argument for these is that they were walked, that they were ritual pathways. So that function informs the style in that particular case. So styles can be different, even if the iconography is similar to what we see in other art forms.
We do have some questions from Zoom. So
Okay.
Jay Farmer types, how accessible to the general public are the sites that you discussed?
Um, like which ones? Uh, the ones that I mentioned in the Palpa Valley, like Chichitara, these are very accessible. There's like a road next to these sites. These have been, documented, published, et cetera, and they're pretty easy to get to. The ones that I work with are a little bit harder to get to. Like I said, there was no documentation of a lot of these sites prior to the work I did for my dissertation. Majuelos, so the one with the mythical killer whale, where did it go? This one. That one did have visitors. So when Peru was doing his settlement pattern survey, we basically heard about the site at that time, and people were taken to this site. And when we got there, there was some writing on the petroglyph panel. So people know about the site, they know where it is, and they go and visit it every once in a while. And the problem is that the sandstone is so smooth that anyone can mark on it. And so since nobody's there to take care of it and people are going there, there was a lot of graffiti around these petroglyph panels. Thankfully, the last time that I was there, I saw that they had closed off the whole Quebrada Majuelos. So that's going to limit the damage there. The other site that I mentioned, this one, that one has no signs of graffiti. So I'm not advertising it,
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Oh,
Peru
you
has
might have to
so
like
much.
walk in there from the valley,
Yeah,
park in the valley and just walk in there. There's no road.
Peru has so many incredible sites, and it's sad that so many of them get damaged. I was on a tour and went to a cemetery in Paracas, and the guide said, "Oh yeah, if you want to, pick up some of the cloth or bones, it's fine." I'm like, "No, it's not."
No. Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that's fortunate. Yeah.
yeah,
There's a lot of like looted cemeteries in this part of the Nazca Valley. Like
yeah,
just go into these sites when drives by looting holes and looting holes, unfortunately.
yeah. Stephen Russ asks, any comments on the possible dyes used for the vibrant colors of the embroideries?
Well, I don't work directly with Texas, but we know things like cochineal, for example, is used
Hmm.
for the reds.
And that's the worm that lives on the cactus?
Yes, the little bugs.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
wonderful. All right. Let's see if we have more questions from our in-person audience.
Other than the softness of the rock, are there any other natural characteristics of the rock that would apply to speak or
To the
where they are? I noticed that for some of like the natural striated rock seems evident, especially like with that dark like I'm wondering if that's a less water.
Well, here's the deal about this orca site. There's a lot of fossils in that area. And I've always wondered about that. Like there's all these marine fossils, shells, and I wondered if that was why there's these, marine representations this far inland. Um, so maybe, we can speculate about that, but that's definitely part of that location. Yes.
So I wondered if you have some ideas of the, do you have any, it's not
That might be the one that, the microphone that.
So I'll talk loud.
Okay.
Do you have thoughts about the meanings and interpretations of some of these things? For instance, you talked about the lines on the mouth, and you could see a source for where that came from. What about some of the things like the
lines or the lines coming out of the head or anything else? So anything about the meaning of it all?
The hair is always emphasized in Paracas and Nazca art. So you do have those representations of the flowing hair in Paracas. Sometimes the trophy heads are being held by the hair as well. I don't know that we can really like get to, further interpretations of why that is. Captives also in Moche iconography are sometimes pulled by the hair as well. But the trophy head representations, at least for Nazca and Paracas, those are related to agricultural representations. So they are, have a greater symbolism about, death or life coming from death. They're probably used in like agricultural ceremonies and rituals too.
Any other questions from the in-person audience?
Yes.
Are you going to continue with research in this area, or are you going to
Expand to another site or two, or where do you go from here?
I hope so. One of the things I want to do is revisit some of the sites that I haven't done imaging for. Like, for example, that first example of the ocular being, where did it go? That one. I don't have any recent photos of this one. I documented it when I was doing my rock art site survey. And I have not been able to go back. So I would like to like visit those sites that just have isolated decorated stones and do 3D imaging like what I showed, and maybe some RTI to be able to like have a better documentation of these. Thankfully, these are not really at a place where they might have graffiti. This one's really difficult to get to. So it is protected at least.
Any other in-person questions? All right, I don't see any more questions on Zoom. Thank you, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulties earlier. Had some permission issues with the computer and the equipment at the library. But I want to remind everybody that next month we will be back in person and on Zoom. And we started an hour earlier than we used to. So 2 o'clock is kind of set up and general chat and in person, and then 2:30 is the talk. So that's May 18th. We'll be back at the Evanston Public Library with Jessica Bishop from the University of Illinois, and we'll be talking about Brego or Bill, early Chicago history through an analysis of horse skeletons. And please check out in the chat how to join and renew your membership. And I want to give a special thanks to Dr. Nieves for coming out today. This has been an incredible, informative talk. And of course, I'm passionate, like want to learn more about Peru and the ancient civilizations here. So big virtual or in person applause for our guest speaker today. And thank you, everyone, and hope to see you in person or virtually next month.